My name is Grace Richardson, and I'm 26 years old. The night my family raised their glasses to celebrate my sister was the same night something inside me broke quietly, permanently. The dining room shimmered with soft golden light, polished silverware, and forced laughter that echoed off the walls like a performance. My father sat at the head of the table, alive in a way he hadn't been for months, his cheeks finally holding color again. Everyone called it a miracle, a second chance, a story worth celebrating. But as I sat there, fingers clenched under the table, I knew the truth they had buried beneath their smiles. I just did what any daughter would do, Emily said, her voice trembling in practiced humility as she lowered her gaze. The room melted for her. My mother reached over and squeezed her hand, pride shining in her eyes like Emily had just saved the world. My uncle raised his glass higher, calling her the strongest girl in the family. Compliments wrapped around her like a crown she wore effortlessly. And I sat there, invisible, swallowing words that burned my throat like acid. No one looked at me, not once, not when the story was told again. How Emily had been there through everything, how she had stepped up when it mattered most. Their words twisted reality into something unrecognizable. I watched my father nod along, his eyes filled with gratitude. For her, that was the moment it hit me, slow and suffocating. They weren't just ignoring me, they had erased me. My chest tightened as memories clawed their way to the surface. The hospital room, the sterile smell, the endless nights I spent sitting beside my father while machines beeped like ticking clocks counting down his life. The doctors had been clear. He needed a transplant, urgently. And when the tests came back, there had been only one match in the entire family, only one person who could save him, me. I remembered the silence when the doctor said it, the way my mother's face paled, the way Emily looked away instantly, as if avoiding eye contact could erase responsibility. It's a big risk, the doctor had warned gently. We need to be absolutely sure. But I hadn't hesitated, not for a second, because he was my father, because I loved him, because I truly believed that love like that would mean something. The surgery wasn't heroic. It wasn't beautiful. It was pain, raw, tearing, unbearable pain that stole my breath and left me shaking in a hospital bed while everyone else moved on with their lives. I remember waking up, my body heavy, my side burning like fire. And the first thing I asked was, is he okay? Not a single thought for myself. Not a single regret, just him. But recovery was slow, lonely, empty. Days passed where no one visited me, calls that never came, messages left unanswered. I told myself they were busy, that they were focused on him, that it was okay. I convinced myself that love didn't need recognition, that sacrifice didn't need applause. I lied to myself over and over again, and now here we were, a perfectly set table, a perfectly rewritten story. My sister, glowing under admiration that didn't belong to her. My family, smiling like nothing was missing. And me, sitting in silence, realizing that the truth wasn't just ignored, it had been stolen. I looked at Emily as she laughed softly, accepting their praise, and something cold settled deep inside my chest. Because in that moment, I understood something terrifying. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. The sound of laughter around the table grew louder. But to me, it felt distant, like I was underwater watching someone else's life unfold. My mother stood up slowly, lifting her glass with trembling hands, her eyes fixed lovingly on Emily. To my brave daughter, she said, her voice thick with emotion, the one who stood by her father and gave him a second chance at life. The words hit me harder than anything else that night, not because they were loud, but because they were wrong, completely, painfully wrong. And yet, no one questioned them. No one even hesitated. Emily placed her hand over her chest, her lips parting as if she were overwhelmed. I couldn't lose him, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to make it believable. She knew exactly how to play this moment. She always did. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes as she walked around the table and wrapped Emily in a tight embrace. You saved him, she repeated softly. And just like that, The lie became truth in that room. Solid, untouchable, permanent. I felt my nails dig into my palm under the table, grounding myself in the sharp sting. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was sinking, slowly, heavily, like something inside me was giving up. I looked at my father, hoping, just hoping, that maybe he would say something, anything, that he would correct them, that he would remember. But he only smiled at Emily, his eyes filled with gratitude that belonged to me. And that silence shattered something I didn't even know I was still holding onto. "Grace, you've been so quiet," my aunt suddenly said, turning her attention toward me for the first time that night. All eyes followed hers, landing on me like a spotlight I never asked for. I forced a small smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm just happy Dad is okay," I said softly, and it wasn't a lie. That was the worst part. Even after everything, my love for him hadn't changed, but something else had. Something darker, something colder. Emily glanced at me then, just for a second, and in that brief moment, the softness in her expression disappeared. It was replaced by something sharp, knowing, almost warning. Then it was gone, hidden behind that same gentle smile everyone adored. But I saw it. I saw the truth she thought she could hide. And suddenly, everything started making sense in a way that made my stomach twist. The hospital visits she never made, the way she avoided every conversation about the transplant, the sudden shift in the story after Dad recovered. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, calculated. She hadn't just let them believe the lie. She had built it, piece by piece, word by word, until it became the only version anyone remembered. And I had been too exhausted, too broken, to stop it. "Emily has always been the strong one," my mother continued proudly, sitting back down beside her. "Even as a child, she never backed away from responsibility." I almost laughed at that. Almost. But the sound got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat, turning into something bitter instead. Because if they only knew, if they had seen what I saw, if they had been there the night the doctor asked who would step forward, and watched Emily walk out of the room, my breathing slowed, steady, controlled, as a new feeling began to take shape inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even anger, not in the way I had known it before. This was different, sharper, clearer, like a fog had lifted, revealing something I had been too blind to see. They didn't forget the truth. They chose a version that was easier, cleaner, one that didn't involve guilt. I lowered my gaze to my untouched plate, the candlelight reflecting softly on the surface, and for the first time that night, I stopped feeling hurt, because hurt meant I still expected something from them, and I didn't anymore. Not their love, not their recognition, not even their honesty. All I felt now was clarity, and clarity can be a very dangerous thing. The dinner ended with applause, laughter, and the clinking of glasses, but I barely remember standing up from that table. Everything felt distant, like I was watching my own life from the outside. Emily was surrounded by everyone, hugged, praised, admired like a hero returning from war. And I quietly slipped away and noticed, just like I had been the entire night, the hallway felt colder than it should have, the silence heavier than the noise I had just left behind. That's when I realized something important. I had spent my entire life waiting to be seen by people who had already decided I didn't matter. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face, finally allowing me to breathe. My body still aches sometimes, a dull reminder of what I had given up. The scar along my side wasn't just physical. It was a mark of everything they chose to ignore. I leaned against the railing, staring into the darkness, replaying every moment that led to this, every sacrifice, every silence, every excuse I made for them. And suddenly, it all felt foolish. Not because I saved my father, but because I believed it would change anything. "You should have said something." The voice behind me cut through my thoughts like a blade. I turned slightly to see Daniel standing a few steps away, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. He had always been different from the rest of them, observant, quiet, dangerous in a way people didn't notice until it was too late. They think she saved him, he added, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. I let out a small, humorless breath. I know what they think, I replied. Daniel walked closer, stopping beside me, his gaze fixed ahead. Then why are you letting it happen? He asked, not accusing, just stating a fact. His question lingered in the air, pressing against the walls I had built inside myself. I didn't answer right away, because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something I was only beginning to understand. Because it doesn't matter anymore, I finally said quietly. He turned his head slightly, studying me. That's not true, he said, after a pause. It matters. You're just choosing silence. His words hit harder than I expected, not because they were harsh, but because they were right. I had been silent, not just tonight, but for weeks, maybe longer. I had let the lie grow, let it spread, let it take root until it became something bigger than the truth itself. And now it felt too late to pull it out. I'm not interested in fighting for people who never fought for me, I said, my voice steady, colder than before. And this time, I meant it. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, a faint, almost knowing smile touched his lips. Who said anything about fighting for them? He asked softly. That made me look at him, really look at him. And for the first time that night, something shifted. There was something in his eyes, something calculated, not emotional, not reactive, intentional. Like he was already 10 steps ahead of a game I didn't even realize I was playing. If the truth won't come out on its own, he continued, his voice low, then maybe it needs a little help. The words settled between us, heavy with implication, and suddenly, the night didn't feel so quiet anymore. I straightened slightly, my mind beginning to move in a different direction. For the first time since that dinner started, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what had been taken from me, and more importantly, how easily they had taken it. That wasn't just betrayal. That was theft of truth, of sacrifice, of identity. And if there was one thing I understood now, it was this. Things taken without consequence have a way of being taken again, unless someone decides to stop it. I looked back toward the house, where laughter still echoed behind closed doors, and something cold settled into place inside me. Not anger, not pain, a decision. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the house sat in silence around me. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to protect them. Every memory came back differently now, sharper, crueler. I remembered Emily standing outside my hospital room after the surgery, not asking if I was okay, only asking whether Dad knew yet. I remembered my mother brushing my hair from my face and whispering, "Don't make this harder for your father." Back then, I thought she meant the recovery. Now I understood what she really meant. Stay quiet, stay invisible, stay useful. The next morning, I drove back to the hospital alone. The building looked exactly the same as it had weeks before. Cold glass doors, wet walls, people carrying flowers, and fear through the hallways. My hands tightened around the steering wheel before I finally stepped inside. The transplant coordinator still remembered me. Her face softened the second she saw me. "Grace," she said gently, "how are you feeling?" I almost laughed at the question. No one had asked me that in weeks. "I need copies of everything," I said. "Every test result, every consent form, every record." For a second, she looked surprised. Then she nodded slowly and disappeared behind a door. 10 minutes later, she returned with a thick folder in her hands. My name was everywhere, across every page. Donor match, surgical consent, recovery reports. There it was in black and white. Undeniable, permanent proof of what I had done. I stared at the papers until the words blurred together. All this time, I had let myself believe maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it didn't matter, but holding that folder in my hands felt like finally touching the truth after drowning in lies. When I got back to my apartment, Daniel was waiting outside, leaning against his car with a cup of coffee in one hand. "You actually did it," he said as I stepped out, the folder clutched tightly against my chest. "I wasn't sure you would." I looked at him for a moment before handing him the papers. He skimmed through them quickly, his jaw tightening with every page. "She really let them believe it was her," he muttered. "No," I corrected quietly. "She made sure they did." Daniel looked up at me then, and for the first time, there was anger in his eyes. Not pity, not sympathy, anger. "Then stop protecting her," he said. "Stop protecting all of them." I turned away and walked inside, but his words followed me through every room. Because he was right. I had spent years making excuses for my family. Emily is insecure. Mom doesn't mean it. Dad is tired. But there comes a point when excuses become chains, and I was finally tired of wearing them. 3 days later, my mother called. Her voice was sweet in the way it always was when she wanted something. "We're having another dinner on Sunday," she said brightly. "Your father wants the whole family there. We're inviting some friends too. We want to celebrate properly this time. Emily deserves it." I closed my eyes for a second, gripping the phone tighter. Another dinner, another speech, another room full of people praising the wrong person. "Of course," I said softly. "I'll be there." The moment I hung up, I sat perfectly still. Then, slowly, I reached for the folder on my kitchen table. The papers were still there, waiting, quiet, patient, powerful. I slid them into a large envelope and placed it carefully in my bag. My pulse was calm now to calm, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. Revenge was emotional, messy. This was something else. This was truth, and truth, when it arrives at the right moment, can destroy everything built on a lie. Sunday was coming. Emily thought she was walking into another celebration. My mother thought she would control the room. My father thought the story was over. None of them knew they were about to sit front row to the moment their perfect life fell apart. Sunday arrived with a quiet kind of tension that sat heavy in my chest. But it wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. The house was already full when I walked in, voices blending into a low hum of excitement and admiration. People I barely knew turned to smile at me, polite but distant, like I was just another guest. And in the center of it all was Emily, glowing under attention, dressed perfectly, laughing softly as if she had nothing to hide. For a moment, I simply stood there, watching her, not with anger, not with pain, but with clarity so sharp. It almost felt like peace. "Grace, you made it," my mother called, her voice bright as she rushed over and kissed my cheek. "We're just about to start." Everyone's been asking about Emily. Of course they had. I nodded quietly, letting her guide me into the dining room that looked even more extravagant than the last time. More people, more decorations, a bigger stage for the same lie. My father caught my eye for a brief second, smiling warmly. But there was something distant in it, something detached, and I realized then, he truly believed it. He believed she saved him. Dinner moved quickly, filled with conversations that circled around one topic: Emily's strength, her sacrifice, her love. Each word landed softer this time, not because they hurt less, but because I had already stepped beyond them. I wasn't here to feel anymore. I was here to end something. Daniel stood across the room, leaning casually against the wall, watching everything unfold with quiet focus. When our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod. It was time. My mother stood up again, just like before, raising her glass to command the room. "Before we finish tonight," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly, "I want to say how proud I am of my daughter Emily." Applause followed immediately, like a rehearsed performance. Emily placed her hand over her heart again, playing her role perfectly. "She gave her father life," my mother continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "There is no greater love than that." And that's when I stood up. The room didn't go silent instantly. It shifted slowly, conversations fading one by one as people noticed me. My mother's expression flickered with confusion, then irritation. "Grace," she said cautiously. I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Emily, who had frozen in place, her smile no longer reaching her eyes. For the first time, she looked unsure, and that was enough. I think there's something missing from this story, I said calmly, my voice steady, cutting through the room without needing to be loud. A ripple of murmurs spread across the table. My father frowned slightly, trying to understand. Grace, this isn't the time, my mother started, but I gently raised my hand, stopping her without even looking in her direction. For once, she stopped talking. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope, placing it carefully on the table in front of me. The sound it made was soft, but it echoed. You're right, I continued, my gaze still locked on Emily. There is no greater love than giving someone life. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the room. But the truth deserves to be part of that story too. Emily's face had gone pale now. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table, her composure cracking for the first time. Grace, what are you doing? She asked quietly, her voice no longer soft and sweet, but tense, real, honest in a way it hadn't been before. I finally looked around the room then, at every face, every person who had believed the lie so easily. And then, without rushing, without hesitation, I opened the envelope, because some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be seen. The sound of paper sliding against wood was almost too quiet for a moment this big, yet somehow it silenced the entire room. I pulled out the documents slowly, deliberately, placing them one by one on the table so everyone could see. Medical records, consent forms, my name printed clearly where it mattered most. Donor, Grace Richardson. The words didn't need explanation. They carried their own weight. A ripple of confusion spread first, then disbelief, then something heavier. People leaned forward, whispers rising like a storm about to break. And I just stood there, letting the truth speak for itself. My father was the first to move. His hands trembled as he reached for the papers, his eyes scanning the lines over and over like he was trying to find a mistake that wasn't there. This isn't, he started, but the words died in his throat. His face drained of color as realization hit him, slow and crushing. He looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The moment everything he believed shattered into pieces. Grace, he whispered, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. My mother stepped forward next, snatching a page as if she could somehow control what it said. Her eyes moved faster, sharper, but the result was the same. Truth doesn't change depending on who reads it. Why would you do this? She demanded suddenly, her voice shaking, not with guilt, but with panic. Not because the truth was painful, but because it was public, because it was out of her control. That's when I understood her completely. This was never about love. It was about image. And Emily, she didn't move at all. She sat frozen in her chair, staring at the table like if she didn't look up, none of it would be real. But reality doesn't disappear just because you refuse to face it. Say something, one of the guests murmured, the room turning toward her now, the same way it had admired her just minutes ago. The shift was brutal, immediate, unforgiving. Slowly, she lifted her head, her eyes glassy, her mask completely gone. I didn't lie, she said weakly. I just didn't correct them. The room reacted instantly, not with sympathy, but with quiet judgment that felt heavier than any shouting could have been. My father stepped back from her like he didn't recognize her anymore. My mother opened her mouth to defend her, to twist it again, to control it. But this time, no one was listening, because the truth had already taken its place, and it wasn't moving. I finally spoke again, my voice calm, steady, and touched by the chaos around me. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, I said, looking directly at my father. I came here because I was erased. My words landed differently now. Not ignored, not dismissed. Felt. I gave you a part of me, I continued quietly, and I would do it again, because you're my father. But what I won't do anymore is stay silent while someone else takes that from me. No one clapped this time. No one spoke. The room sat in the aftermath of something it couldn't undo. My father took a slow step toward me, His eyes filled with regret so deep it almost looked like pain. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking completely now. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. But some things don't go back to the way they were. Some truths don't just fix things, they change them. I gathered the papers calmly, sliding them back into the envelope, my hands steady. Emily was crying now, quietly, her world collapsing the same way mine had that night at the dinner table. But the difference was, she had chosen this. Every moment, every silence, every lie by omission. And now she was living inside the consequences of it. As I turned to leave, I paused for just a second, looking back at the room one last time, at the people, at my family, at everything that had finally been revealed. Karma doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes, it simply waits for the truth to be seen. And when it is, it takes everything that was never truly yours to begin with